46 years I've been dealing with this.
I found out my problem was a real life problem about 5 years ago. I'm still very embarrassed to tell people the name of it because it sounds phony, misophonia.
I didn't know it was a diagnosable affliction. I just thought it was an idiosyncrasy, something you could shake.
I ordered a book and reading on the internet about, they've discovered it's a real behavioral disorder.
As a stupid carpenter, it's above my pay grade, way above.
By the way, not a diagnosis. It's not in the DSM-5, it's not a mental illness, it's just a thing.
Right.
It is it's a real phenomenon. It does occur to a significant degree. It has a definition, and the definition is it's an abnormally strong negative reactions, annoyance and rage, to specific soft sounds, typically eating and breathing.
Do you, your child, or somebody you know hate chewing? What about tapping or whistling? This might be the condition misophonia, a neurophysiological disorder where sounds cause a fight-flight reaction. Sufferers of misophonia experience fear, anger, and emotional distress when faced with trigger sounds.
First, I want to suggest that you accept that this does exist. There is tons of literature saying it exists. There was a Delphi review, I think, in 2020 by Swedo that was funded by the Misophonia Fund. And what that stated was that misophonia is real, it's a real condition, and they did say that it had the characteristics of a disorder. And I do personally use the word disorder, but if you feel a social stigma toward the word disorder, it's totally cool not to use it. That's up to you.
Consensus definition of misophonia. Misophonia is a disorder of decreased tolerance to specific sounds or stimuli associated with such sounds. These stimuli, known as triggers, are experienced as unpleasant or distressing and tend to evoke strong negative emotional, physiological, and behavioral responses that are not seen in most other people. Misophonic responses do not seem to be elicited by the loudness of auditory stimuli, but rather by the specific pattern or meaning to an individual. Trigger stimuli are often repetitive and primarily, but not exclusively, include stimuli generated by another individual, especially those produced by the human body. Once a trigger stimulus is detected, individuals with misophonia may have difficulty distracting themselves from the stimulus and may experience suffering, distress, and/or impairment in social, occupational, or academic functioning. The expression of misophonic symptoms varies, as does the severity, which ranges from mild to severe impairments. Some individuals with misophonia are aware that their reactions to misophonic trigger stimuli are disproportionate to the circumstances. Misophonia symptoms are typically first observed in childhood or early adolescence.
The media and misophonia is a mess. What I mean by that is the media says whatever they want. Dr. Phil, Kathy Lee and Hoda, all of these people are saying nasty things about misophonia. For what reason? I'm not sure.
Well, one thing that I realized, and I'm actually, one of the early things that she told me was that I was a good eater. And I went, oh, good. Yeah, I just, I generally keep my mouth closed. And it's a good thing.
Oh, I see. Courteous eater. Right,
yes,
yeah.
exactly. But, I eat horrible things for my body,
right.
But I keep my mouth closed while I eat them. But it turns out that she was telling me that because she has this thing called misophonia. I don't know if anybody's heard of misophonia, but it's a, yeah. But for the rest of us, I'll explain. So here's, this sound that is misophonia, people close your ears. It's just this sound. That sound is gross. You don't really want to hear. Yeah. Misophonia, people hear that like 20 times louder than you do, and it drives them insane.
Do you really think they are hearing it louder than we do, or they just can't tolerate even the smallest annoyance?
I don't know, but it'll turn a person who has misophonia off. Like they're just blank stare and inner rage if they hear that.
So your wife does this?
So for the most part, I didn't see it, and I went around thinking I was a good eater. There was one time where I was eating cereal, and I guess not a good cereal eater. I found
No one
out.
is, really.
She was like this. And she kept on going, I'm gonna just get a drink of water and like getting out. I was like, what's going on?
What do you do if you go to like dinner or God forbid you order soup?
No, I had soup and ramen and pho, all that is just right out.
Nothing liquid, huh?
Yeah. No, I'm fine, but I'll see her, we'll be eating, and all of a sudden she'll just go, and I'll go, what happened? She's like, there's a bad eater. Like, she can hear it across a restaurant.
Wow.
It's like a superpower. That
In a
just
way,
drives you
it's like
insane.
a really worthless superpower. Like, if she were like a detective or something, maybe it could be applied to like help solve crimes or something. But
Exactly.
really, it's doing nothing but driving her crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's nothing she can do about it.
There's nothing she can do about it. So gum chewing is really tough for people who have misophonia.
Wow.
We just keep our mouth closed generally, and we don't bother our misophonia sufferers that are among us.
Add that kiss the bride moment.
Celebrities who have said they have misophonia include Kelly Ripa, Kelly Osbourne, Melanie Linsky, who actually has come out and said she has misophonia, but Jason Ritter, her partner, has actually confirmed this on a late night show, and they have been absolutely lovely about the condition. And I think they are great, wonderful people, and I'm sorry that they have to deal with this disorder because as a married person with misophonia, I know it sucks. But other uses of misophonia in the media have been getting more popular, such as shows like Criminal Minds, Dear White People, and I'm sure these examples are going to grow and grow.
When does the constant drone of flip-flops become background noise? My misophonia is triggered as
Oh, misophonia, she does braids out of Waller, right?
Look at you making jokes. It's a hearing condition and also a great name for an Outcast album.
Especially since misophonia has been in lots of popular press. We're talking the New York Times, HuffPost, Thought Catalog. Oh my God. The Observer. These are articles that people are reading. And they're not always right. They're getting better. But there is a huge segment of misophonia content that says things like, misophonia is chewing rage. Misophonia is blah, blah, blah. But that's not really based in reality or research. What misophonia actually is, in my opinion, is a condition that is harming the people who are suffering from it. And when you have people on television who are saying things about misophonia that are untrue or not based on reality or research, this can hurt the people with the disorder. The number one thing people often tell me when they first hear that they have misophonia is, I searched it online on the computer and I realized, oh my God, this is a real condition. I'm not crazy. But what happens if these people search the disorder and what they see is media saying, haha, you are crazy. Why? Why are you having this reaction to sounds? You're nuts. Isn't that funny? Oh my God, mildly interesting fact. Did you know that there's people that are tortured by sounds? Great. It's hilarious. Our distress is not something to laugh about. But because misophonia is new, there's not enough information about the disorder, and people don't really know what it is. They might not know that there are several people, maybe people in their own lives, that are terrified to tell them that the condition exists. They might even be afraid that people might use these trigger sounds against them. For example, these sounds are so normal and so common that it would be really easy to use them against a person with misophonia. For example, common triggers are whistling, chewing, tapping, sneezing, pen clicking. You know where there's pens? Everywhere. You know where people eat? Everywhere. People now even chew gum at workplaces, and the amount of triggers that we are facing are more common today than they might have ever been. I know one thing. If I had chewed gum in class in elementary school, I would have been in big trouble. I'm not saying these changes are bad. They are helpful for people with other disorders like autism or ADHD, people who need to stimulate and have sensory input. Those people need these things, but people with misophonia need the opposite, which is exhausting. And I feel for you if you have a partner or a family member that has two opposites, one person with misophonia, one with, say, ADHD and a need for stimulation. they don't always go well together, especially if someone likes to bounce their legs or tap their feet or their fingers or trill their nails across a table. I'm not going to make these sounds because I know people with misophonia will watch this documentary, and I don't want to do that. So I guess I want to just like sit here and talk about misophonia in the media from a media perspective. I've been writing about misophonia since 2015. I first got published on HuffPost, I believe, in 2016. And I've written articles about being exploited by providers who are offering nonsensical treatments that do not treat the disorder. You cannot treat a neurophysiological or a brain-based condition where sensory stimuli is not being processed by the brain by using cognitive theory, because you need to have cognition to use cognitive theory. And I am now a therapist in New Brunswick, Canada, and I think cognitive behavioral therapy and cognitive therapies can help, but not with misophonia itself. They help more with things like learning to live with the disorder, learning to live with the fact that you're not normal. I hate that term, but you know what I mean. And learning to adapt to a world that might not accommodate you. But that doesn't mean that, you know, we are doing exposure therapy or anything like that. And I am highly against exposure therapy. So one question I got was, you first got misophonia at 19. How did your family react to the sudden change? They were confused. I have no siblings, but my mom and my dad were very confused. I remember my father told me that he thought I hated whistling because I was jealous because I can't whistle. And I can't whistle, but I don't think I'm jealous of people who can. I actually am. I'd prefer if no one whistled. My mother's leg movements were one of mine, and I'm trying very, very hard not to make trigger sounds like that during this. My parents were cool, you know, for the most part, other than my dad not believing me at first. Eventually he believed me, and I lived alone for a long time. There were other family fights, but they were evolved around extended family, and those were not easy. Imagine you woke up tomorrow and suddenly the thing you love most in the world caused you pain. Imagine if that was your mother, your father, your husband, your wife, your child. How would you feel if that person was now so anxiety inducing that you were terrified to be around them? For people with misophonia, this is a reality in many cases. We often avoid social events, weddings, funerals, restaurants, family gatherings, people who have specific voices that we just can't handle. Now, some people might think that this is a fear or an avoidance. The name miso means hate and phonia means sound, but people with misophonia are not afraid, nor do they hate these sounds. People with misophonia are not afraid of sounds, nor do they hate them. They might develop these cognitive feelings towards sounds later, but to start, what's actually happening is that their brain is not processing sounds or visuals. There are visual triggers such as, you know, tapping, swaying, movements, but we also need more research on whether or not the visuals and the sounds go together. But people with misophonia, we're not thinking about this reaction before it happens. I will wake up from a dead sleep, and if there's a lawnmower, I'm triggered. I did not wake up and then hear the sound. I woke up because the sound raised my heart rate. If I wear a heart rate monitor, I will notice when I'm triggered that my heart rate jumps up as high as 140 beats per minute, almost instantaneously upon being triggered. If there's one thing I want to get in the heads of people, it's that misophonia is really impacting the people who have it. It makes every relationship harder. It makes every single thing you do harder. It makes sitting out on your lawn enjoying a cup of coffee harder. It makes going to a bar nearly impossible for many. If there's chewing and that's your trigger, restaurants are unlikely. Movie theaters have too many movements and too much popcorn. So what do? Where do you go? How do you live like this? The answer seems to be with great accommodation, great care, and a lot of distress. And when a treatment doesn't exist for a condition, that makes it even harder. People with misophonia are not trying to be this way. We would do anything to get rid of this disorder.
I remember this as clearly as if it was yesterday. Bless my father for trying to help me. The next night during dinner, when he noticed my stepmother chewing with her mouth open, he said something about it. He said, "Chew with your mouth closed at the dinner table," while pointing his fork pointedly at her. You could have heard a pin drop. My stomach did a flip. Was this it? Was this going to be the end of my torment? My stepmother glared daggers at my father. She coolly stood up and said, "Can I speak with you outside, please?" Her eyes never leaving my father's. Long story short, my stepmother, being my stepmom, took special offense to my father's display, seeing him as taking my side against her, and took extra steps to ensure she stamped out whatever it was that me and my father had between us that allowed me to open up to him. I went back to being a ball of anxiety during mealtimes, barely eating at all, and bottling up all that rage until I could finally find some blessed peace and quiet. Weeks went by, turned into months, and my miso triggers only got worse. Now it wasn't only my stepmother that triggered me. It was my little brothers too. There were 3 of them, and it was part of my task as their older sister to look after them when my father was away, as well as other household chores. I remember gently pinching my little brother's lips together, trying to show him how to chew with a closed mouth, like this. And as soon as my fingers would leave his lips, he'd start chewing with an open mouth instantly. The rage overcame me. Before I knew it, smack! I'd open-handed smacked my precious little brother across the face. Hard. He started crying, and I started panicking, trying to get him to stop with any distraction I could think of, the whole time, apologizing and fighting back my own tears. Why would I do this to my beloved little brother, the most innocent thing I've ever known in this world? I hated myself. I just couldn't understand why I was this way. What's going on? My stepmother had heard the crying and had emerged from the house to see what the commotion was all about. My heart sank. I was done for now. I didn't respond. I just knelt in front of the crying youngster with panic in my eyes, terrified for what was about to happen. She took one look at my little brother, who still had a distinct hand mark on his cheek, scooped him up, went inside and called my father to report. I didn't come home that night. Months turned into years, and I had rationalized my misophonia into hatred towards my stepmother because she was the source of my biggest triggers, and I just could not stand being around her while she was eating, which it seemed she was constantly putting a celery stick or apple slices or something in her mouth. I started searching for excuses to not be in the home, since I wasn't allowed to visit friends' homes. Extracurricular activities, band, basketball. I even took up a part-time job working after school and weekends. Since these things often went on during dinner time, I'd often come home late and hungry. Knowing as much, my stepmother guarded the refrigerator when I got home, making sure I went straight to my room without even a snack. She put a lock on the freezer after she caught my father slipping me a frozen fruit snack one night. She didn't like that I wanted a life outside of babysitting and household chores and wanted to put a stop to it. Being a good-natured person who was raised to respect adults, it took a long time for me to finally snap, but snap I finally did. I remember it was my turn to put the dishes away, and I was working on putting the silver away from the dishwasher basket and into the silverware drawer. My stepmother was standing behind me, looking over my shoulder to make sure I was putting the silverware away properly. My dad was away from work, so she knew she could be extra if she wanted to. She was happily snacking away on something. I was holding a fork in my hand, turned to her, and was already crying when I screamed in her face, "Just leave me alone." And I ran into my bedroom and slammed the door. Of course, I'm sure the first thing she did was call my father and report. I went through all the normal movements of the next day. Get up, get breakfast, milk the goats, go to school, come home, do some chores, and I quickly hid myself away in my bed as quietly as I could as soon as I was finished. I just wanted to die. The anticipation of whatever repercussion for what I'd done was killing me. Finally, late into the night, my dad came home. He opened my bedroom door. Of course, I was awake. He knelt down so that we were eye to eye, and he said, "I think it's time that you went to live with your mother." I looked him in the eye and unflinchingly said, "I think you are right." I had the van packed and ready to go by daybreak. My dad called my mom to let her know her house would soon have a +1. She couldn't get away from her job at the drop of a hat that moment, but luckily my stepdad could that day, and he met us halfway. And just like that, I was living in a whole new place with people who couldn't have possibly known my struggles with misophonia. I was 15.
I gotta say, it's hard to answer this question because the response is so physical. The emotions come later, and the emotions are intense. When I'm first triggered by a sound, I feel my whole body tighten. I feel almost like I'm being squeezed. I feel everything get heavier. My heart rate starts to race. I almost feel like I can't breathe, like I'm gasping. I'm like, oh my God, what is happening? And then when I realize that it's a trigger, my ears will become more attentive because I'm then trying really hard to figure out what it is. So I'll be looking and I'll be like scanning, almost like I'm on a ship trying to find something in the distance, and I'm trying to listen. And I'm like, okay, where is it? Where is it? And I need to know what the sound is, even if I hear what the sound is and figure out it's a lawnmower. I need to hear it, see it, find the threat, and then I'm still triggered after I find it. So I've tried to get better about putting noise canceling earbuds in right away, but it can be really hard because your heart rate, yeah, it can go back down right away, but every time you hear that sound, we don't habituate. So if that lawnmower is still out there an hour later, if I don't keep my noise canceling earbuds in and really try to keep myself grounded, use sensory regulation skills such as a sensory diet by an occupational therapist, if I don't do all these things, I just feel sicker and sicker. And I found myself having migraines. I found myself having flu-like symptoms. And yeah, it's been really hard.
Are there certain things that during the course of a day you hear sounds all the time?
Yes.
Are there certain sounds that drive you crazy? They just get under your skin. Once you hear them, you know your senses go up. For some people it's chewing. For some people it's sniffing. For some people it's typing on a keyboard. How about pen clicking? There's a name for it.
Misophonia.
Is that real? No, you know what this is going to be?
Sounds like something you get at a Chinese restaurant. I'll have mine with misophonia, please. Right, doesn't it?
You know what? I think this is going to be one of those weird things that they find out it isn't true, and they're like, oh, it's misophony. It wasn't real.
Oh, it's phony. Yeah.
Is it one of those?
But it's also referred to as selective sound sensitivity syndrome, which has a lot of alliterations.
Are there sounds that bug you when you?
I don't like the chomping up.
Yeah, that gets on your nerves?
Yes.
Okay, I usually don't notice sounds, but if someone alerts me to one, there's nothing else I can think about. They go, could you believe how that guy's snoring? Sometimes in the...
Well, I was just going to say snoring, and it used to, Frank's snoring used to drive me crazy. Now I love to hear it.
Yeah.
You know, everything's relative.
So I've been angry about Kathy Lee and Hoda in their stupid video on misophonia for almost a decade. We did a petition with over 3,000 signatures. I believe it was a lovely mother of a child with misophonia who made the petition at the time. I'm sorry, I can't remember her name. They never responded, which I am not surprised. But their comments were hurtful, and they're calling it like misophonia. Ha ha ha, this is so funny. And then I still see Happy Lee in my head mocking us, making movements and the triggers. And every time I remember it, I get upset. Like every time I remember that this is a thing that happened on, well, I'll say national television, but I don't really know how many people watch Happy Lee and know that, which I don't understand taking jokes at the expense of the community. And I mean, I don't want to be overly sensitive either, because I understand that people make fun of disorders all the time, and that, comedy is a way that we go through life. But what really bothered me wasn't even necessarily that it was comedy. Because I have other conditions, and people like make fun of OCD, which I have, or they make fun of other things I have, and it's like there's no question that OCD exists, or there's no question that heart attacks exist and stuff like that. But what there is a question of is there going to be research for misophonia? Is it going to get better? And it is getting better, but it's not like this is something that the public has good resources. So when someone with a platform that could do so much good chooses to instead cause pain, for me, it's very hurtful. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what they said. What does matter, though, is that we get the right information out there. We get research out there. We let people know about Kumar's work, especially the brain basis for misophonia. We let people know about Sweeto's Delphi studies saying that misophonia exists. We look at the research. We figure out more. So how do you know you have misophonia? There is a standardized measure from Duke, the Duke Misophonia Questionnaire. You can take that. It's a self-measure that can tell you if you have the criteria for the disorder. There are other measures that exist. I don't know the name off the top of my head. You can do these in conjunction with a mental health practitioner, an audiologist, a doctor, or on your own. I know the Duke website has the DMQ available for download. I also think misophonia is one of those things where you can know you have it by the fact that you've asked that question, because most people don't ask if they're sensitive to sounds. Like, if the standard sounds that cause misophonia cause you distress, then you have what's been described. It's not like it's some kind of blood test determining, does whistling cause you distress? Does whistling cause you distress? Does chewing cause you distress? Does pouring water into a glass cause you distress? And different people have different triggers, but like I said, it's one of those things where if you didn't have misophonia, why would you be asking the question? I deal with it by reaching out to organizations like WebMD and Medical News Today and sites like that. Dealing with stigma is also about your everyday life, explaining to your own doctor, I actually printed out my article for HuffPost. My doctor doesn't know I have misophonia, and I mailed it to him. So I was living away at the time at university, and next time I went there, he said, "Thank you for mailing me this. It actually helped." And he read it, and he was amazing. His answer then, of course, was, "I believe you, but I don't know what I can do for you." But simply the "I believe you" was very nice. I actually have a story and dealing with the stigma when it comes to practitioners. And where I live in Canada, it's actually really hard to get a doctor. So I finally got a nurse practitioner after about 4 years on the waiting list for a doctor. And I go in, and this is like the height of COVID. I was having a lot of trouble wearing masks because of sensory processing issues, which may or may not be part of misophonia. I truly believe they are. And I mentioned to her, sensory processing disorder and misophonia. And she just told me that's not a valid excuse. And I handed her my pamphlets, and I handed her like my information on misophonia. It's like, here you go, here's the information, and I'm leaving, because she didn't believe me for start. And I guess my point is, the way to deal with stigma is to advocate for yourself, is to teach family members, it's to teach school members, friends, teachers, bosses, coworkers. And yeah, that's exhausting. I understand. You don't have to, teach everyone. Sometimes you just got to get through the day. But I guess my point is that, each person that you teach about misophonia is one more person that understands the disorder better. So as this grows, as more and more people learn about misophonia, they learn it's real, they learn it's a condition that's actually harming people. We're not just using the word triggered for attention. Yeah, the word triggered being in like pop culture is something horrible. And then people with misophonia saying we have triggers. Even my husband's pointed out, he's like, I really wish it was a different word. Like, yeah, me too, but I don't know what else to call it. I think the number one thing I wish I could get people who don't have misophonia to understand is that this isn't a thought-based disorder. We're not like petulant little children, little brats who refuse to get over this thing. If we could get over it, we would. Like, we're not just people that want to control you. We're not people who are little brats that think the world should change for us. And I mean, in some cases, we wish the world would change for us, but overall, we just wish that we did not have a fight, flight, freeze reaction to sounds and visuals. And I would trade anything not to, but that's not reality. That's not how the world works, unfortunately. But I do believe that there's a lot more to learn about sensory integration in general, our brain, our body, how they connect. Of course, there will be some cognition in there, but it's not the whole puzzle. And there's like all these little pieces. And researchers, I think, really need to talk to each other. They need to learn. They need to grow. And of course, all that takes money. Money is hard to find. So research moving forward, I think, is going to both be very satisfying, and it's going to show connections that were previously considered. And I think it might even show a lot of surprises too, and some real depth as neuroscience grows and as machine learning grows, and all these things come together and go beyond our wildest imagination for information.
One of them is chomping or slurping or gulping. I tend to be almost distracted by what's being said by the sound.
If you could stop eating the marshmallows for a minute.
It could be as simple as just swallowing, the sound of swallowing.
We all feel annoyance,
right,
but this is something different.
Well, I think that my gut reaction is to yell, but I control that.